Emily Clarke had always been ambitious, even by New York standards. At 28, she had already spent 6 years working as a journalist, covering local politics, human interest stories, and the occasional celebrity event. Though her work was appreciated, the pay never matched her effort, and she often found herself wondering if her career would ever break out of the small circles she moved in. She longed for something bigger, something that would challenge her and make her name recognized beyond the city limits. She often scrolled through international job boards, imagining herself reporting from far-off lands, attending high-profile events, and meeting influential people who shaped global culture. Yet nothing concrete ever appeared, until one late evening an email landed in her inbox that would alter the course of her life forever. The email was brief but striking. It came from a private account, with no official media outlet attached, and the sender claimed to represent a wealthy Dubai Sheikh looking to hire a journalist. The job description was vague but enticing. Emily was to cover lifestyle, culture, and social events for a private media team with a salary of $5,000 a week. It was nearly 10 times what she earned at her current job. The word seemed unreal, almost too good to be true, but every fiber of her ambition told her this could be the opportunity she had been waiting for. The email did not ask for a resume or references initially. Instead, it offered a video call to discuss the terms further. The informality struck her as odd, but in her excitement, she brushed it aside. For hours, Emily researched the Sheikh's name, cross-checking news articles, social media accounts, and online profiles. There were inconsistencies and few reliable sources, but there was also just enough evidence of wealth and influence to make her believe it was legitimate. Friends and colleagues she reached out to were cautious. Some warned her that such an opportunity could be a scam, while others questioned the ethics of working directly for someone of immense wealth without media oversight. Emily listened, nodded, and thanked them, but deep down, the allure of adventure and financial security overpowered her doubts. Within a week, Emily had booked her flight and arranged temporary accommodation in Dubai. The day she left New York, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and unease. Boarding the plane, she imagined the life that awaited her: sunlit rooftops, luxurious apartments, and invitations to events she had only seen in magazines. She envisioned her career taking off in ways that were impossible in her small newsroom back home. Upon arrival, Emily was greeted with the kind of opulence that she had only glimpsed online. A sleek black car met her at the airport, taking her through streets lined with shimmering skyscrapers. She stayed in a modern apartment in one of the city's affluent districts, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic views of the city's skyline. Everything felt like a dream, yet beneath the surface of luxury, an uneasy tension lingered. The opulence was intoxicating, but Emily couldn't shake a small, nagging sense of uncertainty, a whisper in the back of her mind that not everything was as it seemed. She tried to push aside the doubt, telling herself that opportunity was rare and that sometimes risk was part of the journey. With her laptop, notebook, and a sense of hope, Emily prepared to step into a world that shimmered with wealth and influence, unaware that the glittering surface masked dangers she could never have anticipated. This email, so simple and unassuming, had set her on a path from which there might be no return. Emily's first weeks in Dubai were nothing short of mesmerizing. The city unfolded before her like a glittering dream, its skyline a jagged array of glass and steel reflecting the relentless sun. She quickly became accustomed to the luxury that surrounded her. Her apartment was more like a showroom, with polished floors, oversized windows, and a balcony overlooking a maze of bustling streets and glimmering canals. The Sheikh's team ensured she had everything she could possibly need: designer clothes, private drivers, and invitations to exclusive gatherings that promised both glamour and influence. Social media quickly became her stage. Photos of Emily at rooftop parties, standing beside luxury cars, or holding cocktails in designer gowns earned her thousands of likes and comments, feeding her sense of accomplishment and adventure. For a while, it felt like she had stepped into a new life she had only imagined. But as days turned into weeks, small inconsistencies began to unsettle her. Assignments were often vague, sometimes asking her to write stories about the Sheikh's private collections or lifestyle without providing clear deadlines or direction. At first, Emily assumed it was just the flexibility of working for someone wealthy and powerful. Soon, however, the nature of the requests started to shift. The Sheikh's associates asked for photos and videos of her in ways that felt increasingly personal, sometimes uncomfortable. Meetings extended late into the night, and the line between professional work and personal expectations blurred. Emily began to feel watched, a sensation she couldn't shake even in the privacy of her apartment. Attempts to reach friends and colleagues back in New York were met with delayed responses or outright silence. Texts she sent detailing her unusual assignments were left unanswered, and calls seemed to drop mysteriously. It was as if a wall had risen between her and the life she had left behind. Emily tried to rationalize it, telling herself that she was in a new time zone, working irregular hours, and that her friends were simply busy. But the growing isolation weighed heavily on her, creating a quiet tension that her glamorous surroundings could not dispel. The city itself, dazzling as it was, contributed to the unease. Skyscrapers and shopping districts glittered by day, but by night, shadowy alleys and less traveled roads hinted at a different, harsher side of life. Emily began noticing strange figures in the background of photos, unfamiliar cars that seemed to follow her, and the occasional hint that she was being observed. Even the people who had seemed friendly at first now appeared guarded, their smiles polite but distant. One morning, a subtle yet jarring moment occurred when a request came to photograph her in her apartment at odd hours, under the pretext of authentic lifestyle content. Emily hesitated, feeling a pit of unease deepen in her stomach. She realized the job was no longer about journalism. It was about her being present, available, and photographed at the whims of powerful figures. Her reporting skills, her questions, her curiosity, none of it seemed to matter anymore. The reality of her situation began to sink in. She had stepped into a world where wealth and influence dictated behavior, and the rules were not those she understood. Despite the discomfort and subtle warnings, Emily pushed herself to continue. She told herself she could navigate this world, that her intelligence and adaptability would keep her safe. Yet every day, the glamorous facade of her new life became harder to trust. The glittering luxury hid something darker, something she was only beginning to sense, a truth that would soon shatter the illusion entirely. The city that had initially thrilled her now held a silent, menacing undertone that she could not yet name, but could increasingly feel closing in around her. Days began to pass, and Emily's routine grew increasingly strange. She no longer had a fixed schedule, and the line between work and personal obligations blurred almost entirely. Early mornings were replaced by late-night meetings that seemed to appear out of nowhere, sometimes at locations she had never been told about in advance. The tasks she was asked to complete shifted subtly, yet alarmingly, from journalism to things that felt invasive and personal. There were frequent requests for private photographs and videos, sometimes at her apartment, sometimes in luxury venues where the Sheikh or his associates were present. Emily tried to maintain professionalism, convincing herself that these were part of the job and that she could navigate the situation safely. Then, one morning she simply didn't arrive at the Sheikh's residence for her assignments. At first, her absence was dismissed as a minor scheduling issue, a misunderstanding of time. Later, when she failed to respond to calls and messages, concern began to rise. The Sheikh's team offered vague explanations, claiming she had left for a sudden business trip or was temporarily unavailable due to health reasons. But Emily's friends in New York, sensing something was wrong, became increasingly alarmed. Emails went unanswered, phone calls dropped mysteriously, and social media accounts that she had once updated frequently remained eerily silent. The digital void heightened the fear that something serious had occurred. As the hours turned into days, Emily's disappearance became a puzzle fraught with alarming gaps. Her apartment, once meticulously maintained, showed subtle signs of disturbance. Personal belongings were slightly out of place, a purse left behind, her laptop missing. CCTV footage from nearby streets captured glimpses of her leaving the apartment with a man whose face was obscured by a hood, but the video feed was incomplete. Frames had been erased, leaving only tantalizing fragments of her last known movements. Investigators and friends speculated wildly. Was she coerced? Had she run away? Or was there something far more sinister at play? The authorities in Dubai moved cautiously, hindered by jurisdictional complications and her temporary residency status. Statements from the Sheikh's team were vague and contradictory, making it increasingly difficult to trace her steps. Meanwhile, media coverage began to intensify, both locally and internationally. News outlets reported on the disappearance of the young journalist, highlighting the wealth and influence surrounding her last known employer. Online forums buzzed with theories, ranging from a voluntary disappearance to kidnapping, fueling public fascination and fear. Throughout this time, Emily remained unseen. Her absence was a growing shadow over her friends, colleagues, and the wider public. Messages left on social media accounts were ignored, and emails bounced back, as if she had vanished completely. Every clue uncovered led only to more questions. Who had she left with? Why were her contacts in New York unable to reach her? And most chilling of all, how could someone seemingly so alive and ambitious vanish without leaving a trace in a city teeming with cameras, surveillance, and digital footprints? The suspense escalated with each passing day, creating a growing dread that Emily's disappearance was far from ordinary. Those who had once admired her courage and ambition began to realize the stark reality. The glamorous world she had entered may have been a trap. And the further the investigation delved, the more it became clear that Emily Clarke's story was about to take a dark and horrifying turn, one that would shock both Dubai and the world beyond. Weeks turned into a tense silence, and the search for Emily Clarke grew increasingly desperate. Authorities, friends, and media outlets scoured Dubai for any sign of her, yet answers were frustratingly scarce. Rumors circulated, but every lead seemed to evaporate into thin air. Then, one morning, a fisherman working near the outskirts of Dubai Creek made a discovery that would shock the city and the world. A plastic bag floated near the water's edge, partially submerged and moving with the tide. Curious, he pulled it from the water, only to realize with horror that it contained human remains. Forensic experts were called immediately, and the grim reality was confirmed. The remains belonged to Emily Clarke. Only half of her body had been recovered, the other half nowhere to be found. The scene suggested a deliberate attempt to conceal her death, a calculated effort to make her disappear in pieces. The initial shock quickly transformed into a chilling investigation. Authorities began combing through her last known locations, revisiting apartment complexes, surveillance footage, and communications. They discovered her laptop had been wiped clean, her apartment ransacked, and her bank accounts mysteriously drained by transfers to untraceable offshore accounts. Every detail hinted at someone with immense resources and knowledge of the system, someone who could manipulate events behind the scenes with frightening precision. The investigation also revealed subtle signs that Emily had realized the danger she was in, moments before her disappearance. Notes found on her laptop draft suggested she had grown increasingly uneasy about her assignments. She had written about the strange requests, the late-night meetings, and the feeling of being constantly observed. Every line reflected growing anxiety and an awareness that her work environment was not what it seemed. But those warnings were silenced by the brutal reality of her murder, leaving her intentions and fears known only to the fragments she left behind. International attention intensified as news of the discovery spread. Social media exploded with speculation, theories, and outrage. People questioned how a young journalist, ambitious and talented, could fall victim to such a calculated and horrifying fate. Journalists and human rights organizations raised concerns about the involvement of powerful figures and the difficulty of prosecuting crimes when diplomatic immunity and jurisdictional barriers were involved. Every report emphasized the grotesque nature of the crime. Half of a body discovered, the other half vanished. A life cut short under circumstances that no one could fully explain. Investigators faced obstacles at every turn. Surveillance footage was incomplete or tampered with, witnesses were reluctant to speak, and the wealthy and influential connections surrounding the case created an almost impenetrable wall of secrecy. Yet despite the challenges, one thing became clear. Emily Clarke had stumbled into a dangerous world she could not navigate alone. What had begun as an ambitious leap toward her dream career had spiraled into a nightmare of control, manipulation, and ultimately, murder. Her story became a cautionary tale, a haunting reminder of how ambition can collide with danger in unexpected ways. While her death left a void for her family, friends, and colleagues, it also uncovered a shadowy underworld where wealth and power could obscure the most horrifying acts. Emily Clarke's remains were only half recovered, but the full story of her final days hinted at something far more sinister lurking behind the glittering surface of wealth and opportunity. Her life, ambition, and courage were abruptly ended, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt those left behind and intrigue the world for years to come. The aftermath of Emily Clarke's death sent shockwaves far beyond Dubai. Investigators, journalists, and concerned citizens around the world struggled to piece together what had happened to the young journalist who had seemed so full of life and ambition. Her friends and family were left grappling with a sense of helplessness, haunted by the unanswered questions surrounding her disappearance and murder. Every clue uncovered only deepened the mystery. The half of her body that remained missing, the erased surveillance footage, the mysterious offshore transfers from her bank accounts, and the inconsistencies in the statements given by those connected to the Sheikh. It was becoming increasingly clear that Emily had stumbled into a world far more dangerous than she could have imagined. The Sheikh himself remained an untouchable figure in the investigation. Diplomatic immunity, coupled with his immense wealth and influence, created a near-impenetrable barrier for law enforcement. Every effort to question his associates met with polite deflection, sometimes outright denial. The power dynamic was stark. A young journalist alone in a foreign country, facing forces she could neither predict nor resist. Investigators slowly pieced together a disturbing picture of manipulation and control, suggesting that Emily had been lured into a situation from which escape was almost impossible. Her talent, her curiosity, and her ambition had become liabilities in a world dominated by secrecy and power. The international media seized on every detail of the case, transforming Emily's story into a cautionary tale about the dangers of ambition intersecting with unchecked power. Articles highlighted the duality of Dubai's glittering facade, luxury and wealth masking a hidden underworld where influence could manipulate justice and where the vulnerable could be silenced with terrifying efficiency. Forums and social media platforms were filled with speculation, outrage, and sorrow. Some discussions focused on the ethical responsibilities of journalists who take on assignments abroad. Others centered on the chilling realization that a single opportunity could carry lethal consequences. Despite the horror of her death, Emily Clarke's story also revealed the resilience and determination of those seeking justice. Investigators continued to search for leads, tracking financial transactions, interviewing witnesses, and following any shred of evidence that could uncover the truth behind the half-body discovery. Advocacy groups and journalists working on her case pressured authorities for transparency, shining a spotlight on the difficulty of holding powerful individuals accountable in complex international cases. The story became more than just a murder investigation. It was a window into the dangers lurking behind glamour and wealth, and a warning about the risks faced by those who dare to pursue their ambitions in unfamiliar territories. Ultimately, Emily's life and death left a lasting mark. Her ambition, courage, and curiosity, once celebrated as defining traits, were tragically silenced, but her story continued to resonate. It exposed the vulnerability of individuals caught in a web of power they could not control, and it underscored the stark reality that opportunity can sometimes mask unimaginable danger. For her friends, family, and the wider world, Emily Clarke became a symbol of both inspiration and caution, a reminder that the glitter of wealth and success can conceal shadows darker than anyone expects. Though her story ended in tragedy, the questions she left behind and the haunting mystery of her final days ensure that Emily Clarke will not be forgotten, and her case continues to challenge assumptions about safety, ambition, and the true cost of pursuing dreams in a world ruled by power.